Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Committee on Ways and Means and Committee on Finance, Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Golkachia. Senator Harris. Senator Wynn.
Here.
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen. Chair Watts.
And I am here. Please mark Chair Harris present when she arrives. So members, we have 2 budgets from the Department of Public Safety today, and then 4 budgets from the Department of Wildlife. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I'd like to welcome the Department of Public Safety up. We're going to hear budgets related to Nevada Highway Patrol and the Central Repository for Nevada Records of Criminal History. Hello, Director Togliatti. Welcome back. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning, and good morning, members of the committee. I am George Togliatti, Director of the Department of Public Safety, and I see our Highway Patrol Management Team getting seated up there at the Capitol. We have I think, an excellent presentation for you that will be led by the Chief of our Highway Patrol of the Department of Public Safety, which is Colonel Pat Conway. And we also have a number of members of our management team who will be available to answer any specific questions after the presentation. So I will turn it over to Colonel Pat Conway.
Good morning, Chair Watts and members of the committee. As the director said, I'm Colonel Pat Conway with the Department of Public Safety, and I'm Chief of the Nevada Highway Patrol. I'd also like to introduce Lieutenant Colonel Martin Malesko and Administrative Services Officers Christy Defer and Denny Gutteri. Behind me are also members of my team who assisted in preparing this presentation today, and they will be available for questions should those arise. It's our pleasure to be here to provide an overview of the Nevada Highway Patrol to the Senate Committee on Finance, Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, and the Joint Subcommittees on Public Safety. Thank you for inviting us. What I plan to do today is pass this on to my team members. I'm going to turn the first part of this presentation over to Lieutenant Colonel Malesko to kind of give you an overview.
Thank you, Colonel Conway. Good morning, Chair Watts and members of the committee. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Martin Malesko with the Department of Public Safety, and I'm the Assistant Chief of the Nevada Highway Patrol. Established in 1949 with only 10 employees, the Nevada Highway Patrol is governed by Chapter 480 of the Nevada Revised Statutes. This statute provides for the creation of the Nevada Highway Patrol, its composition, its powers, the duties of the chief, contracting authority for control of vehicular traffic in connection with special events and personnel duties. The Nevada Highway Patrol services 110,000 square miles, which is over 100,805 roadway lane miles throughout Nevada, which is the 7th largest state in the country. To put this into perspective, state troopers are statutorily responsible for enough miles to travel around the earth 4 times. The Nevada Highway Patrol is comprised of 597 employees throughout 30 different job classifications located in all 17 counties. These dedicated men and women are aimed at protecting Nevada, the Silver State, its citizens, and visitors. The Nevada Highway Patrol enforces traffic laws of the state, investigates traffic crashes, assists motorists, and enforces and regulates commercial vehicles transporting cargo and hazardous materials. We are committed to being the state's trusted law enforcement leader, focused on public safety through traffic enforcement and education. We are the roadway to a safer Nevada, and we stand together to serve and protect. Through our noble cause, we honor our history with great pride and commitment. We are the Nevada Highway Patrol. The Nevada Highway Patrol has 3 budget accounts. Budget account 4713, which is the Highway Patrol's primary budget account and is highway funded. Budget account 4721 provides for grant funding for commercial vehicle enforcement. Budget account 4705 provides forfeiture funding for the department's K-9 program. The Nevada Highway Patrol's core activities include administrative support services, traffic, commercial, and special operations. Special operations includes investigations, criminal interdiction, and task forces. These officers work alongside state, local, and federal partners, all of which contribute to our overall mission. And again, we are committed to increasing public awareness through our Big Five focus areas, which will be covered in the upcoming slides. The Nevada Highway Patrol has 4 primary goals. These goals include investing in our people by focusing on employee health and wellness, identifying future leaders through succession planning, and retaining our current workforce, mitigating loss of life, injuries, and property damage by reevaluating current resource allocation, improving data collection and transparency, and identifying best practices. Enhancing public trust by improving availability of services, education and awareness, and accountability to the public. Improving divisional efficiencies by using the requested budget enhancements to provide our employees with the required tools to do their jobs and more efficiently utilize available resources. We have 3 critical emphasis areas. These have been branded as the 3 E's: education, enforcement, and engineering. The Nevada Highway Patrol educates our employees throughout their careers. However, educating the public is equally important for awareness, support, and transparency. For instance, the Traffic Management Center in Las Vegas is a multi-agency shared operations and communication center where critical messaging can be deployed onto our roadways in a moment's notice. We have also taken a proactive approach in educating the public through the use of social media platforms, news outlets, and messaging campaigns. Engineering includes internal and external partnerships with entities such as the Regional Transportation Commission, the Nevada Department of Transportation, and other county and city agencies to ensure the safety of our roadways. One example of this is the implementation of wrong-way driving detection systems throughout the state of Nevada. Education, enforcement, and engineering. When people know about them, share them, and live by them, more lives will be saved, and that is our bottom line. Our number 1 job is to create a safe and efficient traveling environment. In traffic operations, our primary performance measure is the mileage death rate, or the MDR. The mileage death rate compares fatalities and serious bodily injury crashes per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. This measurement is the standard set by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA. The chart above shows comparative fatality rates for the nation, Nevada, and in our jurisdiction. As shown, the mileage death rate in Nevada increased from 1.26 deaths per 100 million miles traveled in 2020 to 1.41 in 2021. Within our jurisdiction alone, there was a 14% increase in fatalities compared to a national increase of only 10.5. In 2021 and 2022, Nevada recorded the highest number of roadway deaths since 2005. Americans continue to drive more than they did during the height of the pandemic, and with preliminary Federal Highway Administration data showing a 1.6 increase in vehicle miles traveled, or about 39 billion miles. Our work is far from done, and we must do more to save lives and prevent injury and address the crisis on our roadways. Commercial Operations oversees the enforcement, safety, and compliance of commercial vehicles on Nevada's roadways. This performance measure compares commercial vehicle crashes to the total number of non-commercial vehicle crashes. It is no surprise that commercial vehicles can weigh 20 to 30 times more than a passenger vehicle. And due to their size and weight, they are significantly more dangerous and virtually guaranteed to cause substantial injury and damage whenever involved. While these crashes are not as frequent, these crashes result in greater carnage and tend to be more severe by interrupting traffic flow and interstate commerce. This is more pronounced in the rural areas where there are no alternative routes and traffic is stalled until the crash scene is cleared. The total amount of commercial vehicle crashes in Nevada is relatively low and has remained near 7.5% of our total crashes investigated. However, we investigated 31 fatal crashes in 2021 and 24 in 2022. This is a sharp increase over the 14 that were only investigated in 2020. Our employees are by far our greatest asset, and we are committed to protecting them in all aspects of our job, including being behind the wheel. On average, troopers drive 24,000 miles a year. They drive in the coldest days in Ely and the hottest days in Las Vegas. While responding to crashes, enforcing laws, and driving to the far reaches of the state to assist the stranded, troopers must have a reliable fleet capable of meeting the rigorous demands of the Highway Patrol. We follow a strict maintenance schedule that ensures our vehicles can perform or respond in any condition or environment. Although our goal is 85%, we have exceeded that goal with an overall average of 91.3%, further improving safety, reducing maintenance cost, and out-of-service time. Community safety and success is traditionally measured by crime statistics. Sadly, the number of people being killed in crashes is not weighed. In 2021, nearly 43,000 people were killed in traffic crashes nationwide. This is more than the 40,000 gun violence cases, but which did you hear more about? The United States is out of proportion, making our job increasingly more difficult. Even more alarming, our non-fatal crashes in Nevada have increased nearly 32% over the last year alone to 20,000. That is roughly the population of Elko or the size of the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. While we remain committed, our increasing vacancy rate also continues to threaten our great state. The lower image on the screen compares filled versus vacant sworn positions in red. Our overall 36% trooper vacancy rate equals reduced service levels, increased response times, decreased visibility, unsafe roadways, less enforcement, and officer fatigue. Our state is a global destination, and while growth is encouraging and welcome, we must take back our roadways before these challenges become irreversible. In slide 3, we discussed our mission, vision, and purpose, or MVP for short. The truth is our employees are the real MVPs, and without them, we do not exist. Becoming a state trooper is a calling and a lifetime commitment filled with the challenges both professionally and personally, but make no mistake, we are committed to perfection. The stressors of policing by itself take a significant toll on the physical and mental health of officers. We must continue to work together to find out-of-the-box solutions to combat these challenges. And although recruitment is important, we must also invest in our current workforce to create safer communities. A more comprehensive approach will also lead to an improved and successful retransformation of not only our department, but the Highway Patrol, and lead to better recruitment overall. I will now turn the presentation over to our Administrative Services Officer, Christy Defer, to review our budget enhancements.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I am Christy Defer with the Department of Public Safety, and I am the Administrative Services Officer 3 with the Nevada Highway Patrol. E673 funds a 2-grade increase for DPS Officer 1, 2, and Sergeant positions. This is for our line level and first line supervisors. E354 funds the expansion of law enforcement coverage on Interstate 15 and Interstate 80. E225 funds 1 management analyst position due to an increase in multiple programs to include grants, permits, contract services, and the Ignition Interlock program. The enhancements on this slide are fleet-related. E353 funds 1 equipment mechanic and 2 communication system specialists. E225 funds annual critical comprehensive technical training for fleet mechanic technicians, supervisors, and managers. E301 funds the annual contracted maintenance costs of the electronic warrant system, which significantly streamlines the arrest process. E901 transfers one IT professional position from the Nevada Highway Patrol to the Director's Office budget. This decision unit is a companion to E902. E902 transfers personnel from the Nevada Highway Patrol to the Director's Office to staff part of the new Departmental Research and Planning Technology team. This decision unit is associated with E901. E710 funds the replacement of end-of-life fleet vehicles that have exceeded the mileage threshold. E711 funds the replacement of end-of-life police motorcycles exceeding their mileage threshold. E712 funds replacement of 2 vehicle hoists, 3 tire machines, and a forklift. E713 funds the replacement of ballistic rifle vests, helmets, and optics per the recommended replacement guidelines established by the manufacturer and National Institute of Justice. E714 funds the replacement of all electronic control devices. E715 funds the replacement of end-of-life mobile data computers, or MDCs, and citation printers. E716 funds the replacement of end-of-life radar certification systems. E717 funds the replacement of all end-of-life body-worn cameras. E718 funds the replacement of 2 weigh in motion, or WIM, scales for commercial enforcement, and E719 funds the replacement of end-of-life computer hardware and software. E724 funds the purchase of a new equipment steel shipping container and oil filter crushers for proper disposal. E725 funds the purchase of oral fluid mobile analyzer systems as roadside tools to detect illicit drug use. E308 funds a staffing study to identify required staffing levels and improve resource allocation based on Nevada's continued growth to better ensure delivery of agency missions and goals. And Chair, that concludes our enhancements for budget account 4713. Before we move on to 4721, we would like to take a brief pause and see if there's any questions from the committee.
Thank you. So we're actually only looking at 4713 today, not the other budget accounts. So
Okay.
we can go ahead and skip those.
We will
And
skip.
it's up to you if you want to finish your presentation, and then we can go to questions. I think that'd be fine.
Okay, so yes, I will turn the presentation back over to the Lieutenant Colonel.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Christy. Chair Watson, members of the committee, Martin Malesko for the record. Meeting our statutory responsibilities cannot be done without the ongoing support and legislative support and focus on public safety. In the previous session, we received funding for our fleet, drone, and canine programs, to name a few. We can equip our troopers with a reliable vehicle capable of meeting the rigorous demands of what we do. Nevada is a diverse state filled with large swings in elevation, varying landscape, weather, and traffic. While there is no one-size-fits-all, the police interceptor is a near-perfect match. The improved functionality, durability, and safety features have reduced out-of-service time and maintenance cost and increased safety with their 75-mile-per-hour crash rating. Our drone program has improved significantly. Latest drone technology allows us to diagram crash scenes in greater detail and more efficiently. This allows us to open roadways sooner, reducing secondary crashes, congestion, and cost. Drones also provide enhanced response capabilities with critical incidents, hazardous material spills, natural disasters, vehicle barricades, and more. The Nevada Highway Patrol investigates drug trafficking, illegal contraband, and criminal activity on our roadways. Your support has also allowed us to expand our K-9 program into new areas. We have deployed a K-9 to Ely, and we are adding a K-9 into commercial enforcement. We have also added an explosive detection dog in northern Nevada, and we're looking at both electronic detection and accelerant K-9s to further improve investigative capabilities and to better defend our state. We thank you, and Nevada thanks you. We would be remiss if we did not talk about community partnerships and how vital they have been to our innovation, creativity, and the overall success of our mission. Rather than speak of the countless partnerships, we would like to highlight an event that would not be possible without the collective support of many, including Attorney General Ford and former Governor Brian Sandoval. In 2017, the Nevada Highway Patrol created a first-of-its-kind candlelight vigil to honor and pay tribute to the victims lost to traffic crashes. This vigil also helped our officers and it offered support to the families, personnel, and guests in a heartfelt ceremony that was held around the state. The candlelight vigil gained state and national attention and quickly turned into an annual event. Unfortunately, COVID-19 stalled efforts like many others. However, I'm humbled to say we're back. Our next candlelight vigil is scheduled for Friday, March 24th, 2023 in Las Vegas. This vigil will recognize the 382 lives lost in traffic crashes throughout Nevada in 2022. Although we are unable to go back into time and honor those we lost in 2020 and 2021, they are not forgotten, and today, before each of you, we remember the 703 lives tragically taken too soon. No matter the cause, these numbers not only represent a tragedy in terms of the loss of life, but also in terms of the long-lasting effects on those who are left to grieve. The Nevada Highway Patrol is committed to not only recognizing those that we lost, but to do them better and be better so that we can help prevent the next tragedy from happening. Senator Gocochea, and I know Senator Titus is not here today, but as you know, we lost Sergeant Jenkins in 2019, and in just a few short weeks, we're going to honor him for his 3rd anniversary and the senseless murder of him. So, and thank you for your support throughout that time. Our fallen heroes. This is Trooper Micah May and Trooper Cliff Fontaine, 2 fallen and highly decorated intertwined heroes that we lost in 2021. Trooper May was intentionally struck while attempting to stop a violent carjacking criminal following a lengthy vehicle pursuit. In step with Micah, Trooper Cliff Fontaine was one of the first responders on scene. Cliff, a lifetime paramedic and critical care specialist, immediately sprang into action, rendering life-saving aid. Trooper Fontaine orchestrated the first ever downed officer rescue with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's helicopter unit. Because of Cliff's quick thinking, Micah was quickly transported to the nearby University Medical Center, UMC, and began receiving life-saving treatment without delay. Although Micah succumbed to his life-threatening injuries, Cliff gave the gift of time to the family. This allowed the family to make the difficult but heartfelt decision to give the gift of life to others. Micah's organs were donated and saved the life of 3 others. Sadly, a few months later, Cliff lost his battle to COVID-19. Families were forever changed. Fathers were lost, brothers perished. These tragic events not only rocked the law enforcement community, but it devastated our Highway Patrol family in so many ways. It challenged our family in ways that we have never seen or felt before. Micah, a DUI enforcement champion, was recently honored by the Nevada Donor Network on the Donate Life Rose Parade float in Pasadena, California. In partnership with the Office of Traffic Safety, we now host an annual DUI enforcement memorial event to honor Micah. Cliff, a guardian angel, will be honored in Washington, D.C. at the 2023 Stars of Life Award. This is the emergency medical services industry's highest honor. This award will celebrate Cliff's unwavering support towards patient care, his leadership, and commitment to education. And for those that remain, we will do everything within our power to honor those that the sun has set upon and serve at the highest level, continuing to represent the past, the present, and the future. With every new day, every new sunrise, we begin with a renewed purpose. Our state troopers put on their uniform to serve our state with great pride and humility. It is a privilege and honor to be a state trooper and throughout our history, we have proven to be resilient, optimistic, and prideful. Although we have experienced difficult days filled with a lot of adversity, we remain steadfast and committed to the Silver State. We are excited for our future and our road forward. We are people-powered and purpose-driven, and our purpose and passion is saving lives. We are the Nevada Highway Patrol, and nobody, and I mean nobody, does traffic safety better than we do. Thank you, Chair Watts and members of the committee. I will now return the presentation to Colonel Conway for closing.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Colonel Pat Conway, for the record. To the committee and chair and committee members, we want to thank you for your time, your energy, and your support. Chair, on this slide, you find my contact information and the names of those that made this presentation possible. Should the committee need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call us, contact me. At this point, we'd like to open it up to any questions that the members may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we do have some questions from the members. I believe we're going to start with a question from Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all you guys do. We greatly appreciate it. One of the concerns that obviously we all share is the recruitment efforts and the fact that areas like Prim, Moapa, Elko, and the Winnemucca area, or district, sorry, it's hard to recruit. And so one of my questions is how are we providing, especially graveyard coverage, in those areas where we're struggling to recruit?
Pat Conway, for the record. Thank you for the question. What we're engaged in, and if you noticed, one of the enhancement that we've asked for is for some additional troops to cover some of those areas. What we looked at was where do we have major arteries or highways that we do need that 24/7 coverage, and we identified that 15 from California, basically north, and I-80 across the center of the state. And so we're looking to add additional people there, but of course we're sitting on a problem with retention and recruitment right now, and so we have looked at a wide variety of recruitment efforts, and we have a team that's working on that continuously, daily, attending events, recruiting, identifying those areas where we do need that coverage, and looking for folks that are interested there. In addition to that, we are asking for a long-term study. So we have some thoughts about what are the immediate short-term corrections with perhaps adding personnel and hiring and retaining. But we want to do that study and take a look at how we're actually deploying, what the hours of coverage are in various areas across the state. And of course, it's very difficult for us to say that we're going to provide 24/7 coverage on every roadway in the state all the time. It's probably not even ideal or realistic to try and do that. We want to identify those areas where that's the best way to go, and then identify ways to provide that coverage more innovatively in the more rural areas. It's just a matter of identifying how we recruit and retain, and we're asking for that support and help here with maybe some of the enhancement that deals with two pay grade increase, make us maybe competitive with some of the agencies that might be attracting the people away. Hopefully that answered the question.
It does. And Mr. Chair, may I have a follow-up? With the enhancements, and hopefully that will get you the retention and additional hirees, are you anticipating a reduction in the fatalities and just overall crashes with that?
Pat Conway, for the record. That is the single focus, is to take a look at how we're providing service, make sure that's the ideal methodology, and the entire purpose is to reduce fatalities and crashes. That's the focus.
Thank you for that question, and I do appreciate the focus of that of your presentation and your budget in evaluating all of the work you do against those traffic safety metrics. So, I believe we have a question from Chair Harris.
Thank you, Chair Watts. So my question is about some of the new positions you all are requesting. Given that there's currently 137 vacancies, do you anticipate being able to fill 28 new positions?
Thank you for the question. Pat Conway for the record. Clearly, we are in a crisis right now with filling positions or retaining people. And so what we've proposed here is what we think is necessary to get to that point to provide the kinds of service that we're talking about, to reduce fatalities, to improve proactive kind of patrol to improve those metrics. We do have the vacancies, and so what we've identified is that part of our problem, probably the most significant part of our problem, is being on an equal plane with competitors in an environment where perhaps the profession isn't as attractive to people as it may have been in the past. So our focus is hopefully to see an improvement in compensation through that budget enhancement we've requested that will bring some parity or equity, help us to retain people. If we can retain people, then as we go through this hiring process, we start cutting into the vacancy rate, and ultimately over time, we feel we can fill those positions. We're realistic, and we know that's not going to happen overnight, but we think if we can go down that path, retain, then our hirees are starting to fill the vacancies, and then we can get into these additional positions and hit that goal that we're aiming at reducing fatalities and improving driving habits.
Thank you, Chair. Would you all be willing to entertain the idea of maybe filling the first 137 sworn positions and then trying to get 28 more? Given that, we're looking at a biennium budget here, right? And so it's my understanding you already have the flexibility to move those vacancies amongst different areas of the state where you might need them. I guess I'm just a little concerned about whether you can fill the 137 in 2 years, much less 100 and what would now be 165.
Pat Conway for the record. I believe that we have proposed an aggressive agenda here. It is what we've identified, maybe in an ideal circumstance, what would be our needs or desirable for the state, I think. Again, we're realistic and we understand we're sitting on a vacancy rate. I guess my position would be I'm going to hope for the best, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I just want to make clear that we are all partners in helping you fill that vacancy rate. I don't want to indicate otherwise, and that, Chair Watts and I are really trying to make every effort across every budget that comes in front of this committee to take a hard look at that. And we know that there are barriers in the way to filling the position. So I don't want to give any indication that we don't think you guys need these folks. We just want to make sure we're trying to do it in the most fiscally prudent way. Thank you.
Pat Conway for the record, and I'd just like to say we all feel that support. So, and we thank you for that.
All right, thank you. I believe next we have questions from Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Chair Watts. I had a question on the E353, specifically the communication system. I was having a little bit of trouble wrapping my head around that. And my first question would be, how did you come to the conclusion of charging $40 for the other state agencies?
Pat Conway, for the record, I'd like to have my ASO, Denny Gutierrez, address that if that's possible.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Watts. Denny Gortari, Administrative Service Officer for the Department of Public Safety, State Police, Nevada Highway Patrol, and through the chair. The $40 is really what we're trying to do there, is that rate essentially is that we believe that this alignment process that we have to do with these radios to keep, per the manufacturer's requirement, would take about an hour of our communication system specialist's time. Okay, and having said that, we looked at a step 5, which is for that class, and that it comes out to roughly $40.88. So that's a fair rate, and that rate includes the base pay for the step 5 plus 38% for benefits to come up with that rate. So essentially, all these radios that we have to align, if they're non-highway funded entities in our, all our departments, because all our departments are going to have to do this. Okay, and so that would be the rate that we would charge to allocate out the costs, which would, that would be their expense and a revenue for us. But just to make it fair for the highway fund is our objective there.
Thank you. And may I have a follow-up? Okay, thanks. So my question would be also, what agencies are we charging? And then do you intend for that fee to cover the 2 communication specialists beyond the 23-25 biennium?
Yes, we do. In terms of the second question, the agencies that we would be supporting include the following: Capitol Police, the Director's Office, Dignitary Protection, Fire Marshal, our MIXAP Unit 4721, Investigations Division, the Highway Patrol. We'll be doing our own as well. OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, Parole and Probation, CCD, can't talk today, and then the Training Division as well. So all those folks that have to have radios in their vehicles, we want to make sure that those radios are lined, because these current radios that are digital that's going to the new system, they're very temperamental. Okay, if they're just off a little bit, they don't, they're very robust in terms of their reception and everything, but, we have to assure that if they're off a little, they don't perform well and their range isn't there. So we don't want to jeopardize our troopers that are out there doing the work with one of the most important tools they have, which is the radio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe next we have a question from Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for being here and for all you do. We all understand what a challenge it's been for you all over the past few years. My question is also in E353, and it has to do with the equipment mechanic position.
Correct.
And just wondering if you're experiencing a backlog or delay in fleet maintenance due to the increased complexities of the vehicles being serviced?
Very much so. Okay, and I think, Denny Gortari, through the chair, to the Assemblyman, yes, what we have there is that back in 2019, we had a sergeant that was basically reassigned to patrol operations that oversaw that whole unit, okay? And then when that happened, we needed a person that was over both shops, somebody that could supervise the shop and also the communication section, okay? And at that point, what we did is we reclassified a person that was the equipment mechanic to oversee the whole shebang, okay? However, what we have learned is that position, and at the time, when we had the sergeant overseeing everything, we had that equipment mechanic We're asking now that it would be basically the same number of individuals, but it would be all civilian. Okay, so allowing those, those troopers to be out where we need them, okay, and then have the job family of all the fleet people and the radio people where we all understand. And so it's been very good in terms of efficiency because, we have certain measures for the maintenance on the vehicles and that sort of thing. But to directly answer your question, this equipment mechanic 4 would oversee, like the one we did before we upscaled it, okay, will oversee 3 equipment mechanic 2s. All right, that person is a working supervisor. Okay, he has to do all the reviews for all the work for those individuals, and he or she, and then also, the person that's the highway equipment maintenance supervisor 1 has a tremendous amount of responsibility. He has to manage 262 cars. There's a lot of things going on with those cars. They're more complicated, okay? And then, so just what he does is, they get to the point, they tell me, is they don't want to work, they want to be with their families. It's so busy in that position. It is a critical position. And that position now will be able to better manage and oversee all the staff and develop people. We want to develop our people so we have a good career path. So then you'd have the 2, the 4, and then the highway equipment maintenance person. So all that gives you a chain of command through there where we're developing a number 2. So did I answer your question?
Yes, definitely. And then you have a sergeant back on the,
Yes.
doing
Yes,
the policing
that
job.
fleet is an incredibly, I want to say, complicated and busy unit. There's many things going on. We have walk-ins, and our main prerogative is to make sure our troopers are safe. I feel that we have the safest vehicle out there with the highest rear impact crash rating, which, we've been hit in the back a lot in terms of some of the crashes we've been in there. The motoring public has, the behavior of the public in terms of motoring is, and we hope with obviously the extra troopers that we're getting that we can bring down the behavior. But yeah, we're getting hit because they're just driving way too fast and they're not watching for us. So we feel very proud of the fact that we have the safest vehicle. But yes, we're trying to get the troopers out there where they're trained to be, and at the same time we can manage our unit to support them. Without the troopers, we have no purpose. We're there to keep the troopers safe.
Thank you. I believe we have one more question on this decision unit from Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. And I think you touched upon this area a little bit, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding with some of the background information that we get. It sounds like this individual would be supervising the 4 additional individuals in southern area if approved. Who's currently supervising them?
Yes.
Or is that something that is the whole office gets to be supervised by the same person?
Danny Gurtari, Administrative Service Officer over the fleet unit through the chair. So we currently have the highway equipment supervisor who's at grade 37. Okay, and then we have the other equipment mechanics are grade 32s. This would put a grade, basically a grade 34, or, a 34 in there, or 33, apologize, a grade 33. So that person has to have a lot more capability and understanding about the vehicles because they're fairly complex. That person will also oversee the 3 equipment mechanic 2s. So right now we're getting people that we have to develop. When they come in, what we're getting in for that type of position is they need training. They need to get experience in terms of, what do you do with a vehicle? So that extra level is a more sophisticated person with higher ability to diagnose vehicles and identify problem areas. And then that would allow the equipment, the supervisor, which is the grade 37, to help manage and work with a sworn directly. He is the biggest liaison we have to the command staff. So, and also that position works to rotate our vehicles. So one of the things we have to do is rotate vehicles from one assignment to another. And in doing that is, we want to depreciate those vehicles the best we can in a straight line fashion. And moving them from an assignment that's a high mileage, or vice versa, helps us manage the fleet.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that great presentation. And first, I just have to say, I think I know a young man in the J4NG program who might really like to join fleet maintenance, and that we could be recruiting out of some of those areas. Loves vehicle maintenance. That's not my question, however. I do have a question on the decision unit E225, which is the management analyst position for fiscal operations. I understand that this position would oversee some fiscal operations, grant management, and program management activities. Can you just talk a little bit about, are there programs that this position would oversee that we're currently not in compliance with regard to state or federal regulations because of the vacancies?
Christy Defer, Administrative Services Officer for the record. Yes, we have had challenges, not only with sworn, but with civilian vacancies as well. What we envision for this position is to be able to better handle those programs. We don't have a backlog per se, but it has been a challenge to keep up with all of the regulations that a grant requires, and we really want to be able to pursue those grant opportunities when we can. In the past, historically, we've had sworn positions in each region that have handled a lot of the grant application process, for example, and grant management. And we want to identify those opportunities to maybe shift those duties to civilian positions where we can, to free up the sworn to be able to, work on sworn things and get back out on the road. And so we want to be able to utilize this position to be able to stay better, more on top of all of the requirements and regulations and day-to-day things that we have too. Not only for grants, but we have internal controls and state policies and internal regulations that we have. And so we want to be able to have that oversight at a fiscal level internally, just a little bit more oversight on a daily basis, I think, is what we're looking for.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair. Thank you. I'm curious to know, have you had an opportunity or have you worked with the Governor's Office of Grants, would be my first question. And then secondarily, are there any currently peace officers that are conducting fiscal operations of the Nevada Highway Patrol? Do you currently have?
Christy Defer, again, for the record. Yes, we have, I actually have attended some of the grant offices programs and trainings, and we look forward to working with them more. I know that that's they've kind of gone off and established this new, agency. So yes, we definitely want to reach out to them and work with them more to see what grant opportunities we have available for the agency. What was your second question? I'm sorry.
Do you currently have sworn peace officers that are conducting fiscal operations?
No, that's primarily handled at the headquarters fiscal unit by civilians. We have to have that sworn input, of course, because they're the subject matter experts on what the need is regionally. And so we really work hand in hand with sworn leadership. But the day-to-day fiscal operations, we try to have that handled by civilian staff at headquarters.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions on this budget account? Seeing none, thank you very much again for your time and your presentation today.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll go on to the next budget account, which is the Central Repository. And we want to keep things moving, so I think I'm going to ask our presenters to get to the budget details and the enhancements as quickly as possible. Welcome. Take your time. Whenever you're ready, you can begin. Just remember to introduce yourselves for the record.
Good morning, Chair Watts and members of the Joint Subcommittee. My name is Erica Suziyamas, and I'm the Division Administrator for the Records, Communications, and Compliance Division within the Department of Public Safety, otherwise known as RCCD, or the Central Repository. I have with me today some amazing team members. I've got Jason Colnut to my left here. He's our Chief Fiscal Officer. And I have Robert Kalin. He is our Senior Technical Advisor with Mission Critical Partners for our NCGIS Modernization Program. And I also have Shannon Helgett with me in the audience, and she's our Records Bureau Chief. And they're all, excuse me, they're all here to help me answer questions. So we're just going to go ahead and jump to slide 4, please. So I just wanted to give you a quick, very high-level overview of what my division is comprised of. The RCCD has 205 authorized positions in total, with 30 contracted positions, and is comprised of 2 bureaus. The Communications Bureau, which is responsible for dispatch services to our sworn officers, not only for DPS, but for about a dozen or so allied agencies as well. Our Records Bureau has 14 disparate programs, some of which include the Sex Offender Registry, the Brady Point of Contact Firearms Program, Uniform Crime Reporting, the Repository for Information Concerning Orders for Protection, as well as civil and criminal fingerprints, which span across the Fingerprint Examiner Unit, Criminal Records Unit, and our Civil Fingerprint Support Unit. We also have the Information Security and Compliance Unit, our Fiscal Office, and the NCGIS Modernization Program. Like everybody else around the state, our CCD suffers from staffing shortages. In some cases, these staffing shortages have become a public and officer safety concern, particularly in our Communications Bureau, where our dispatch vacancy rate sits at about 28%, and our Records Bureau at 31%. We've been forced to close the Carson City Dispatch Center during the overnight hours due to insufficient staffing levels and just not having the staff to cover the overnight hours. In doing this, we have to roll the phones and the radio channels down to the Las Vegas Center, who also has its own staffing shortages, but are now having to take on radio and phone traffic for the entire state every night. We've had to consolidate radio channels, which puts more officers on a single channel for a single dispatcher to manage. Staff are burdened with having to work long hours, in some cases 16-hour shifts, to provide adequate phone and radio coverage. Our staff are burned out and underpaid, which leads to them looking for alternative employment, doing the same job for more money, better benefits, and less hours worked. Since we're going to shorten this up, I've provided a slide deck for your perusing pleasure, since my division performs a plethora of legislative activities and critical tasks. But for the sake of time, we're going to jump straight to the budget and start on slide 15. We're good. Okay. E-232 provides for funding for the division's NCGIS Compliance Unit to travel to Las Vegas to provide training to local agency, terminal agency coordinators. The Terminal Agency Coordinator, or TAC, serves as point of contact at the local agency for matters relating to access to federal criminal justice information systems, known as CJIS, and Nevada CJIS, which we all call NCGIS. The TAC administers CJIS, NCGIS systems programs within the local agency and oversees the agency's compliance with federal and state systems policies. RCCD previously conducted in-person TAC training up until 2020 when COVID hit. The division had initially planned to migrate our training model to online training as part of the NCGIS modernization program, but fast-tracked this effort when travel restrictions were implemented as a result of COVID. The division successfully deployed the online training by October of 2020 to remain in compliance with the FBI CJIS security policies despite the travel ban. Over the past 3 years, with no in-person training, it became evident that the TACs and their authorized personnel were lacking in knowledge. This became evident by the increased number in help desk tickets being opened by TACs and/or the local agency personnel, and an increase in audit findings when the FBI CJIS audit unit conducted their on-site triennial audits in September of 2021. As such, RCCD has determined that a hybrid of in-person training coupled with online training would benefit the division's criminal justice partners the most, and will help keep the local agencies and RCCD in compliance with state and federal laws, policies, and regulations. E-233 provides funding for continued maintenance for 4 batch scanners utilized by the Sex Offender Registry to scan and digitize offender files to remain compliant with the Federal Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act. E-246, E-247, E-248, and E-249. These decision units remove the funding for the NCGIS modernization program from our base budget to funds that the division received from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. The division was approved for a total of $20,853,829 in ARPA funding for the 24-25 biennium in the October 2022 IFC. These 4 decision units represent the funding necessary to continue the development and implementation of the NCGIS modernization program and includes funding for the current positions within the program, as well as the 7 new NCGIS program specialist positions needed to administer the program's service desk upon implementation. These positions will support the division's non-criminal justice civil applicant account holders and customers and will provide level 1 triage services in addition to setting up primary users in the new system. During the modernization efforts, RCCD identified a gap relating to customer service and support for our non-criminal justice account holders. We do not have a centralized help desk or customer service help desk to assist our non-criminal justice customers with business and non-technical needs. If these non-criminal justice customers experience an issue when using the new portal or any of our automated tools, or if they have training needs to use the portal and or the automated tools, they'll need a centralized group of trained service individuals to call for timely assistance and resolution. I'd like to note that the state's enterprise IT services will continue to support the division's criminal justice users. They do not provide help desk services for our non-criminal justice customers. Because the modernized solutions is new technology which will create automated processes and access for our non-criminal justice users, it's necessary to stand up a support desk structure to ensure we can adequately support our civil applicant customers. These customers will include Brady point of contact firearms dealers, civil fingerprint submissions, CCWs, and civil name check users. As such, because the Brady POC is open 7 days per week, it's necessary to provide 8 hours per day, 7 days per week coverage by the service desk. The expected call volume is unknown at this time. The division currently has 2,845 active civil accounts, and each account can have multiple users, therefore it's difficult to determine the number of users we'll need to support or the anticipated call volume at this time. To put this into perspective, RCCD conducted approximately 435,254 combined civil background checks in calendar year 22. Although the division is not slated to go live with full functionality until September 30th of 24, the civil applications are going live in the May or June 2024 timeframe, and therefore it's necessary to bring these positions on board well in advance of go live to ensure staff are adequately trained and prepared to support our customers when the systems are deployed. I'd also like to put on the record that RCCD does not plan to reduce its staffing as a result of the modernization. We know that the modernized solutions will bring efficiencies for all involved. We also are very aware that the solutions will completely change our workflows and processes, and it will be necessary to take an all-hands-on-deck approach to establish the new processes and procedures, flush out any bugs in the new procedures. We can't do this without our amazing and dedicated staff. Once the NCGIS modernization is deployed and new processes and procedures are implemented, our CCD can fully analyze the actual staff efficiencies and determine whether we can reassign, reclassify, or sunset any positions as they become vacant. I also want to add that the cost for the current 8 NCGIS modernization program positions under E-247 will continue for the 24-25 biennium. The division will continue to work with our director's office over the 26-27 biennium to transfer most of this team over to the research and technology unit under the director's office should their budget request be approved. Some of the positions may sunset when staff retire after the modernized solutions are deployed, and RCCD intends to maintain and reclassify one of those positions. E500 replaces the division's administrative assessment revenue with general fund appropriations. The division's administrative assessments have historically been inadequate. Year after year, RCCD has had to use its fee-funded reserves to fund the shortfalls in administrative assessments. These funds are supposed to fund multiple programs and IT systems, but doesn't fund them completely, and we've had to take money from other sources to adequately cover these programs. I'd also like to add that the division uses its reserves to fund unexpected issues that may arise, such as broken equipment and, if necessary, equipment replacement. Our business is very technology dependent and will become more so once the NCGIS modernization deploys full functionality. Technology requires updates, upgrades, and enhancements to ensure security and compliance. And then we have E903, I'm sorry. E903 transfers one business process analyst 2 from budget account 4709 to the director's office budget account 4706 to staff a portion of the new research and planning technology team. And this last slide contains my contact information. Thank you for your time today, and as always, for your support. This concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions, we're happy to try to answer them.
Thank you so much for that presentation and for the overview, particularly of the enhancements. I think we're going to have several questions related to the different moving parts involved in the NCGIS modernization project. I believe we'll begin with Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for making it so succinct and straight to the point. Greatly appreciated it. I think you kind of touched upon already the plan is for the existing positions if it's not approved, because it's very much a team environment is what I saw. But if you could expand upon that a little bit, that if this is not approved in the staffing in E247, what will happen with the staff? And then I think I'll have a follow-up based upon that answer if possible. Maybe.
Had to make sure I knew what positions we were talking about. I apologize. Erica Suziyamas for the record. The positions under E247, if the request, can I clarify that? The request to move these positions to the director's office, is that what you're referring to?
Right, the modernization. It looks like it's the modernization project staffing, and some of that is, it has to do with like the business process analysis 3, 2, and 1, and then and that's in E247, and then also the specialist in E248.
Okay.
What would happen with those?
So I'm going to start with the positions in E248, the NCGIS program specialists. If those are not approved, we simply won't have a support structure for our civil applicant customers. They won't have a single point of contact of individuals to contact for multiple reasons. We get contacted for status inquiries. Introducing new technology for our civil customers is going to be new for them. They've never had this type of technology before. We anticipate they're going to need assistance. First and foremost, we're going to need to set them up in the system, and those positions are going to be responsible for getting the system access established for all of our customers. They'll be responsible for fielding the phone calls and routing the phone calls to the various programs, troubleshooting, monitoring queues of the new system, and they'll be doing the level 1 triage to determine, is this a technical need that we need to open up a ticket with our contracted vendor, or is this a business need? And then the positions are NCGIS modernization positions. Those, if this is not if they're not approved to move to the director's office, will likely stay with RCCD. We'll need that continued support given the level of automation, and we always have enhancements. Every biennium, there's enhancements to make, upgrades, updates.
Thank you, and Chair, if I could ask a follow-up, and thank you, because I know it's kind of like crystal ball, what's going to happen here. So once that once the modernization project has in fact been completed, and rolled out for those various agencies, you touched upon it a little bit, but would the current business process analysis be available to offer that service desk support You touched upon it a little bit, just want to make sure that that's still available, that once it's all done, who's going to be helping out with the service desk support?
Erica Suziyamas, for the record. It will be the 7 in CGIS program specialists that are manning the service desk. The business process analysts are separate, and those are positions that would be responsible for, Bob, you might have to help me out here. The BPAs are responsible for gathering requirements and working with a technical team to make sure that our business needs are met through technology.
Bob Kalin, for the record. We have several existing programs that we aren't modernizing as part of this sort and the protection order system. We have a DNA process. Those are all candidates that we'll want to look at and move to the NCGIS technology. So there's remaining work that the division's going to need to do as we look to modernizing all the services that we provide.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Senator Nguyen.
Thank you. You kind of answered some of these questions already, and I appreciate that we're moving towards modernization. The idea that we're still hand doing a lot of this is crazy in 2023. So I'm glad to see we're making that transition and we're getting closer to that position. Do you currently have staff supporting help desk services for the existing CGIS system?
Erica Suziyamas, for the record, yes. EATS provides help desk services to our criminal justice users.
Okay.
And they will continue to provide help desk services 24/7 to our criminal justice agencies. They do not provide help desk services for our non-criminal justice, our civil applicant account holders.
And do you not have anyone doing that currently?
Erica Suziyamas, for the record, no, we do not. Those phone calls come in and they get fielded to the various program areas.
Okay.
Today, though, they are non-technical in nature, all those phone calls from our civil applicant customers.
And do you know, like, what are typical of those phone calls that are being redirected? Do those have to do with the Brady point of sales? Like, is that predominantly what it is? I'm imagining everyone's shaking their heads.
Erica Suziyamas, for the record. We get a variety of phone calls. We have the sex offender registry, so we have offenders that call. We get phone calls from law enforcement agencies for the registry. We have federal firearms license dealers, FFLs, individuals who've attempted to purchase firearms. We get individuals who've applied for jobs that have submitted their fingerprints and want to know the status of their fingerprint-based background checks.
Oh, that's a lot of angry customers. Do you think if these budget positions were approved, that would alleviate some of that? I know that in some of the other state agencies who are trying to do that, no wrong door, no wrong phone call. Would this alleviate some of that confusion for people calling in for all those various reasons?
Erica Suziyamas, for the record, yes. NCGIS Mod is going to bring a ton of efficiencies. It's going to automate everything. Our fingerprint wait times are going to go, right now we're at probably several weeks. They're going to go from weeks to days. The firearms background checks are going to, those will be automated. The FFLs are no longer going to have to call in and sit in a queue on hold. They can enter their own background checks into the portal, and anything without any hits or records that need to be reviewed are going to process within a matter of minutes, and they're going to have their proceeds immediately.
Do you know how fast that background check happens proposed under the new modernization system?
Bob Kalin, for the record. Like Erica said, the ones that clear automatically will eliminate the queue, and we'll be able to focus on the questionables or what we suspect are going to be denied. Eliminating that volume lets us address those a lot more quickly. We're struggling to meet the 3-day turnaround right now, and we hope to really minimize that and focus on those open ones.
And then finally, kind of in line with that, how long does the agency anticipate it would take to train these new specialists, on the CGIS specialists?
Erica Suziamas, I'm hoping to get, my goal is to get a 6-month lead jump time on that. Get these folks hired. They're going to have to get trained, especially if they're coming from outside of the division. If they promote from within the division, they'll have a good background of what we do. If they're coming from coming from outside, we'll have to train them from the ground up. So I would say probably at least 6 months to get them trained and get them in the trenches with us.
And then just one last question, just because now it sparks some interest. I know that you have like some statutory requirements, like a 3-day with background checks on gun purchases and stuff like that. Are there any other like time-sensitive deadlines for other things that you're have responsibilities for?
Erica Suziamas, for the record, there is no statutory timeframes for us to complete the background checks for civil fingerprints. There is not. Brady is the only one with the federal 3-day turnaround.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next, I think we have a question from Senator Goycochea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and you've already touched on a lot of this, but how would replacing the court administrative assessments with general fund appropriations impact the operations of records, communications, and compliance? And I guess, I've been very supportive of this. That public perception out there, especially with public safety, is, troopers are under a quota. They've got to write so many because, that generates revenue. So I think this is a good move, but if you would answer that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. For the record, Jason Colnut. We've noticed over the last few years, the court assessments or administrative assessments has been dropping. Last year, we brought in $3.3 million, and we're expecting at least $100,000 less this year. The replacement, the decision unit, brings it back up to the budgeted level of $4.8 million, so it would give us a certain number. We wouldn't need to project month to month, what we're getting from each district, and it would allow us some cost certainty. We could project out our expenses without having to cut certain areas.
But real impact to the operation, other than it would just give you the security to move everything ahead, is what you're saying.
For the record, Jason Colnut, yeah, it would allow us to know what we were getting and not have to project out revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have some questions about the reserve levels. Can you just speak to it? It looks like right now, based on this budget, by the end of fiscal year 25, there would be about 189 days of reserves. Can you discuss what factors have led to the growing reserve levels?
For the record, Jason Colnut, we have been trying to keep a 60-day reserve level of, it comes out to about $3.3 million per year is what I'm projecting for 24 and 25. Last year, from the close of fiscal year 22 into 23, we brought forward a little over $8 million in reserve funds. We are going to be using $3 million of that towards the modernization project before the close of this fiscal year. So that will reduce the reserves down to just over $5 million. That would give us a little bit of a cushion beyond the 60-day reserve fund or contingency fund reserves. We are hoping that we can use the additional money in 26 and 27 for modernization, and that we will not have to come back and ask for general fund or seek out some type of grant federal funding to support modernization beyond this next biennium coming up. So carrying forward that money, it is going to be looked at to be used for that modernization or other maintenance and support in other areas that the division needs.
Thank you for that. So it sounds like the goal is to get to that 60-day target, but that might be currently your thoughts are that may be outside of this biennium moving forward to support additional modernization. I think it would be helpful if you can, and I know that's a look down the road, but it'd be helpful to get your current thinking on what that might look like, what those needs may be, so that we can kind of understand where that would go and how you plan to get the reserves down to that 60-day target level. I think, Chair Harris, do you have some additional questions on this?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Watts. Is it the agency's plan to maintain the $3.50 increase for the applicant fees that was approved during 2019 to support the project if ARPA funds are approved to fund the project over the next biennium?
Jason Cullen for the record. We would like to keep the $3.50 in place. We did notice after the increase was approved, because of COVID and the pandemic happening, revenue fell. We just weren't getting the applications in that we had projected. It is starting to recover and get back to a normal level. But in order to maintain the modernization through maintenance and support that we're going to need in the future, the $3.50 will most likely be needed. One thing the administrator and I have talked about is proposing a fee study for the division, not just for the fingerprint fees, but throughout the division for all the fees we charge. And we hope to have that done, completed before the next budget cycle build, about a year from now. And if at that time we see that $3.50 is too much or it's too little, we would put forth a recommendation to get in line with whatever the study shows.
So I guess this is less about what's the appropriate amount of the fee and more about the $3.50 increase having a particular use that we authorized, and now that that need is being met by other dollars, right? And so trying to figure out why keep the $3.50 increase if we are now going to fully fund with ARPA dollars, as opposed to, let's say, offsetting some of those ARPA dollars with the $3.50 increase that you plan to continue to collect.
Jason Cullen for the record. As I mentioned, the carry forward from 22 to 23, and we are using some of that money towards modernization during this current fiscal year. If we were to keep that $3.50 in place, we would be able to maintain that level. We are replacing the modernization, but the division has shortfalls in other areas. We have 4 main funding sources from the administrative or court assessments, Brady fees, and civil name and civil app fingerprints. The entire operation is not funded through the court assessments. We use that money to fund our sex offender registry, which is not a revenue generating program for us. Our criminal records is not a revenue generating program for us. So the entire revenue source between those 4 sources is used to fund the entire division. And we would like to keep it in place to operate. And we know there are things that come up. We will need, as Erica mentioned, replacement equipment. But if we need to repeal it, we will.
Okay, thank you so much. So Chair Watts spoke a little bit about the reserve levels. What would be maybe some of the potential downfalls of reducing the general fund appropriation to help bring that reserve fund, that reserve balance down to the 60-day target level? And how would that impact the funding of criminal-specific programs within the criminal history repository?
For the record, Jason Colnett. The general fund, I assume you're speaking of the court assessments or the administrative assessments, if that would be reduced. If I know proposed in a bill now is to replace, as we had in our enhancements, the court assessments that we get through the administrative office of the courts. That would be replaced with general fund, and I assume that's the general fund you're talking about. If that was to be reduced or eliminated, it would cause us to then run short of our 60-day reserve balance.
So let me just clarify. I'm only talking about reducing the general fund in direct relation to the amount of the reserve that would get you down to the 60-day.
Okay, thank you, Jason Collin, for the record. That would leave us with just that 60-day, of course. We would not be able to fund, and I would expect that like 2 years from now, we'd be sitting here asking you for a general fund to support modernization, because it will go past the end of the next biennium. It will go into 26 and 27 for maintenance and support. We will have new positions if it's approved for the support desk. We will still have positions for the BPAs that were in the modernization currently in the program. So we would, if we're only running on that 60-day contingency, we would most likely be sitting here asking for general fund in 2 years.
Ms. Brigman, go ahead.
Thank you. Sherry Brigham for the record, Deputy Director for the Department of Public Safety. Thank you for all the information. And I think from our perspective, I need to point to history. Many years ago, it was about the time the fiscal crisis happened, the reserves were wiped, basically, by legislature, obviously, to fund other things at that time. And those reserves were intended to be used to develop the modernization program. So as time went on, the division and the department were forced to ask for funding to develop those programs, and we could never get enough funding to actually do the programs correctly. We just got pieces, and those pieces fell apart. As you know, the history, our first and second tries didn't work out. This is the first time that we actually see light, not even light, we see almost the beginning of the train coming through. And it has quietly and perfectly gone through this whole program modernization because the funding has been available in our own reserves. So the purpose of the reserves is not really just the 60-day in our minds. It is to maintain and develop the technology that INCEGIS modernization requires from here until forever. As Bob mentioned earlier, we have other programs that aren't even included in the INCEGIS mod that need to be included. Scope, there was a couple of them, I can't remember.
Erica Suziamas for the record. We have the sex offender registry that needs to be updated and replaced, and our protection order program as well.
Thank you. So the reserves are not there as a slush fund, and I know that can be seen that way. And I would imagine that if they continue to grow to a certain point, to your point, obviously we need to reduce that rate. But the points that they were trying to explain is that the department business end of it is funded, for instance, basically by Brady. So Brady is now funding or trying to fund the sex offender registry and a number of other programs that aren't funded at all because we've never received the court assessments enough to fund those programs. So this general fund replacement of court assessments is helpful because it stabilizes things for us, most definitely. My glasses are fogging up, I apologize. So that's very, very helpful. But if the reserves continue to grow significantly, I can see perhaps in the next biennium evaluating whether or not either we reduce the general fund or we reduce the fees. But I do think that we need more time to get through the modernization, keep the reserves growing so that we can pay for the augmentations that are necessary and the maintenance down the road. And then once that's all covered, you can have it back, swear to God.
Thank you for that,
Thank you.
Ms. Brigham. So, and again, this came up in the previous budget, and I think, both Chair Harris and I, we want to make sure that the agency's needs are met. So please don't take this as, any offense or that we're trying to, reduce the resources that are needed to take on these projects. I think one of our perspectives is reserves, right, is the leftover. And so it sounds like there's needs for that. I think we want to see those reflected in the budget. And then again, understanding that there may be some things that go on past the biennium, understanding what the plan is so that even though that's not necessarily, if it's not necessarily in this biennium's budget, that we have a kind of an accounting for it. And I would probably prefer that those things get budgeted and then and so we know that they're assigned to a purpose and then we carry those over moving forward than having them sit in this reserve category. Additionally, I appreciate your comments at the end, and again was looking through the background materials. Neither Chair Harris nor I sat on the budget committees in 2019, but I know that our colleague, former Assemblywoman Carlton, was very interested in this issue with the $3.50 increase. So is now Senator Neal, and so and that it was indicated that this was going to support the modernization project, and then would be phased out. And we have this federal funding that's come in to support the project. So again, we're not trying to take anything away, but we want to understand what is the full scope of needs for this modernization project. How do all these funding sources fit in? We support the transition away from those volatile administrative assessments to some general fund support. We wanted to make sure that we got this project done. That's why we allocated some of the federal funds to support it. But we want to make sure that there's a pretty clear vision and plan, and that we understand what the needs are for carrying out the overall modernization project as well as ongoing expenses, so that we can make sure that any of the fee revenues that are coming in are going to be appropriate moving forward, and we get those reserves eventually to be in line with the target and not something that is stacked up for other budgeted expenses. So with that, members, are there any other questions on this budget account? All right. Thank you so much. And with that, we will move on to the Department of Wildlife. Welcome, Director Janae and your staff. Go ahead, take your time and get ready, and whenever you are, just state your name for the record and you can begin. And the one thing I will say before you get started again is we did get some of the overview from your department in our pre-session budget briefing, so maybe if we can keep the high-level overview brief and then get into the individual budget accounts, and we plan to kind of go in order and ask questions at each budget account. So we'll go Director's Office, Conservation Education, Law Enforcement, and then Fisheries Management.
Good morning. My name is Alan Janae. I'm the director for Nevada Department of Wildlife. I appreciate the opportunity to come to you and present our budget for FY 23 through 25. Go ahead. Before I get started, I want to introduce our team. As I said, Alan Janae, director. I've got our deputy director of administrative services, Jordan Goshert, and deputy director of natural resources, Mike Scott, here with me, but also from our relevant divisions that have budget questions here today, I've got Chris Crookshanks, our fisheries division administrator, Chris Vasey, our conservation education administrator, and our newly appointed chief of law enforcement, Christy Knight. And so when it gets too deep for me, then I'll be calling them up. So going on to the department's mission, it's been constant. It's to protect, conserve, manage, and restore wildlife and its habitat for the aesthetic, scientific, educational, recreational, and economic benefits to citizens of Nevada and the United States, and to promote the safety of persons using vessels on the waters of Nevada. We have a very broad statutory charge. We are the sole agency responsible for the conservation of nearly 900 wildlife species in the state of Nevada. Our law enforcement division is comprised of Category 1 peace officers responsible for public safety on waterways and enforcement of wildlife laws. As many of you know, Nevada is the 7th largest state. Also, which is really key to our work, is that 85% of that is federal lands, managed and owned by them. And with that is, despite the size of our state and the amount of public lands, is we are the 5th smallest wildlife agency in the nation. Also with that and the responsibility to those federal lands, that nexus comes with the responsibility of participating in the National Environmental Policy Act processes and project approvals that occur on those federal lands, which we take very serious and brings a fair amount of workload with it. And now as a state agency has a unique funding model. 95% of our budget consists of user-derived funds, including federal funding such as Pittman-Robertson's funds, which are derived from the excise taxes on guns, ammunition, and archery equipment, as well as the Dingell-Johnson funds derived from excise taxes on motorboat fuel, small engine fuel, fishing tackle, electric outboard motors, and tariffs on imported yachts and fishing equipment. And then also we have supporting Coast Guard funds that are related to our public and boating safety. Our license revenue has come through as restricted reserve accounts and sportsman's revenue. And as I mentioned, these federal pots of Pittman-Robertson and Dingell-Johnson, as well as Coast Guard, all require a non-federal match. And so that 95% of our budget that comes from our sportsmen and our user base goes to pull in those general or those federal funds, many at a 3-to-1 match ratio. So we get a huge lift by our federal grants. But that leaves NDOW's portion of our budget, only 2% of that comes from the general fund. When you look at us overall, we've got 7 divisions. With the director's office overseeing the data and technology service, the conservation education division that I mentioned before, law enforcement, game division, fisheries division, wildlife diversity, and the habitat division. Overall, we have 329 employees, including our 9 commissioners and approximately 50 seasonal staff. So overall, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 270 employees. We experience a vacancy rate much like other state agencies right now, as we're somewhere around that 20% vacancy rate, with law enforcement probably having the highest vacancy rate of currently about 27%. And that is a challenge to us when we are such a lean agency with such a broad mission in such a large state. But with that is our employees are very passionate about the work they do, very driven, and we take pride in the efficiencies and effectiveness that we do our work. I think Nevada has a reputation for getting things done, and it comes not only in our management of our species and in our public information, but also in our habitat restoration activities. When you look around, it's tough to find other states that are as good in getting things done with so few people. So we take exceptional pride in that. When you look across our agency, we have 150 buildings, 33 radio sites, 14 wildlife management areas that provide over 157,000 acres of habitat for our wildlife species. We have 8 major facilities, 4 fish hatcheries, and these are all distributed across the 30 regions that you can see represented on the map. Getting into the budget, budget account 4460, our director's office. The director's office is the agency administration, has 28 positions. We deal with the Wildlife Commission, the County Advisory Board, Physical Services and Centralized Cost, Human Resources, Engineering and Facilities. Our FY24 budget was $9,935,974, and FY25 is proposed at $9,699,997. Looking at the decision units, diving into the details, E225, efficiency and innovation, for FY24, looking at $164,977, and in FY25, $198,173. And this is to add 3 new accounting assistant positions, domain equitable staffing levels and workload contribution. We have seen since 2018, we have seen an increase in our federal grants from $27.7 million to $51.1 million. And so with that, as you all know, as you move those dollars through to try to get the work done, it often can become, if you don't have the staff in the physical divisions to make sure that you've got the contracts and all the agreements in place, that can definitely be a holdup. And so this is about trying to get those positions in place to help facilitate moving that money and putting that on the ground. E226, $8,910 in both years. This is funds for electronic document storage for the department. This is a system that we have. It's Power DMS. It stores our policy and procedures as well as other physical and personnel policies that we have for the department. E227, $15,000 over both fiscal years, is a request to fund our membership to the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. This is something we've been involved with since its inception. I think it's 80 years. And as an agency that deals with, especially like the federal government at the level that we do, 85% of our public lands in the state are owned by the federal government. When you're just Nevada as a wildlife agency trying to talk to the federal agencies, you often don't carry much weight, but when you become 17 western states, having conversations with them, you have much more of a unified voice and can attract their attention a little bit more effectively. So, plus there's a lot of professional development opportunities in that. It provides our folks the opportunity to learn lessons from other states without, having to see our own failures on some particular items. E710 is looking at $24,566 in FY24 and $44,475 to purchase the replacement of automated external defibrillator AED units, their batteries and pads. We have those spread across the agencies, and basically the change in costs are related to the cost of in that FY25 is mostly about the cost of replacing units. I think it's a 10-year replacement timeline, and so That just happens to be when a significant portion of those units come up for replacement. Looking at classified position changes, E805, looking at $12,871 and FY24, and in FY25 looking at $13,755, requesting funds for the reclassification of a management analyst 3 in the director's office to become a governmental liaison. That is a position that currently is being used for many unfunded mandates as the responsibility for tribal liaison, as well as let me wet my mouth here. I'm stumbling over my own tongue. The language access program, and as well as has led up our recent revision to our strategic plan. So that is what we're looking for with that. E228, a budget amendment, looking for in FY24 $143,734, and in FY25 $174,713, seeking for one new deputy director position to address work capacity and coverage limitations in the director's office. As I mentioned, we are a very small agency with a very small leadership team. And what we have noticed over the last few years is that it becomes really tough to stay on top of all things. Despite Jordan being over administrative services, there's a lot of, as an agency that pulls in our income from license and tag sales, there's a lot to do there, plus managing all of the grants to make sure that we're making most effective work of that. So that's pretty well keeping her busy. Mike Scott in the natural resource position. We have 4 resource divisions, plus monitoring and managing the other divisions is that keeps him, or keeps that position more than busy. It leaves this portion of operations, which is our engineering, our facilities, our lands, our equipment. It's a tougher fill, and it's something we all have kind of tried to carry, but it's definitely becoming more, and we're doing more work in that arena. We've given the update previously of, in the last 5 years, or actually the last 6 years now, we can say, is 560,000 acres of restoration and rehabilitation efforts. That brings a certain workload, immense workload with that, but also we've got a significant portion of lands in the last couple of years. We've acquired 2 additional wildlife management areas, approximately 32,000 acres with Carson Lake and Pasture, as well as the Argenta Wildlife Management Area near Battle Mountain. And each of these comes with facilities and maintenance responsibilities. And so what we're looking for with that position is to try to take on some of that work, but also to try to broaden our sphere of working with partners and communities, and try to have a community outreach program where we could be more involved and working more with our local communities. So that's what we're looking for in the director's office, and understanding your wish, we'll pause for questions.
Thank you very much. I believe we have a question from Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that there are workload increases or changes in the workload that are going to necessitate the addition of these 3 new accounting positions. Could you just give a little bit more specifics on their duties that are going to create this additional workload?
Thank you for the question. Again, Alan Janae, I would call on Deputy Director Goshert to help me with that one.
Thank you for the question. Jordan Goshert, Deputy Director. Currently, the workload in the accounting section is overbearing. So what we're looking for is an accounting assistant 4 to split duties with the current accounting assistant 4, which does most of the approvals, and then an accounting assistant 3 to be in contracts to help with payments, and another accounting assistant 3 to help over in the accounting section, again, with processing payments as well.
And then, just follow up, Mr. Chair, sorry. Thank you. And then, could you just confirm that that the anticipated workload is not due to federal funds such as Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which hasn't been approved by Congress yet?
Yeah, Jordan Goshert, Deputy Director. That is accurate.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. My question is relative to the Deputy Director position. I understand this is a budget amendment that was presented. Can you talk a little bit about the duties that are not currently being performed due to the management capacity limitations that you're experiencing currently?
Yes, thank you for the question, Alan Janae. You're looking at a brand new team up here within the last 6 months. But we have all been with the agency for a significant amount of time, and so we know what that workload looks like. And this was something that we were originally, as we were contemplating a Recovering America's Wildlife Act, as we were looking at holes that we have that we were trying to fill. And this deputy director position was one that came front and center of this is something that right now, although it was considered as RAWA, and it was probably one of the more evident places where we were like, we need more help in trying to manage our resources, because as I say, is just managing the resource plus the administrative portion currently keeps the director's office pretty darn busy, and this opportunity to manage things such as dams, wildlife management areas, restoration, rehabilitation programs. It's not to say that they were covered, but they can be much better handled. And as we contemplate moving forward and trying to do more with those programs and seeing nothing but more and more coming at us, we're seeing wildfires. 55% of our state has been impacted or converted by, our sagebrush habitats have been impacted or converted. And that's not a trend that's changing. And so as we try to work with our federal agencies to implement those restoration activities, plus trying to maintain dams, trying to keep up on facilities, that is not a workload that we want to not cover or go lightly into. We've had a good trend in trying to bring our facilities up in standards and catch up on our maintenance, and we think that that's really important, and we're seeing the payoff of that. Both, I think we have 28 facilities that are residents to our employees that live on site in very, very remote places, and they had kind of been neglected. And so we're working our way through those and bringing those up to standards. And so it's something that we need more focus on, and it is something that was not getting the attention it was due.
Thank you, follow-up, Chair. Thank you. I appreciate the level of detail and consideration and how broad the responsibility level that you're trying to fill. Because I think you've talked a little bit about how this position would benefit the overall department, the director's office in general. I'm curious, have you delineated then specific items or tasks that would be allocated specifically to this deputy director position? You've talked a little bit about dam management, restoration management, facilities management. Do you have an idea of what those responsibilities specifically would be for this position?
Yes, thank you for the question, Director Alan Janae. Currently, our engineering staff is underneath our administrative deputy director right now. We would move that engineering staff out. Lands, wildlife management areas right now reside under natural resources. Our restoration rehabilitation program resides underneath the natural resources in the Habitat Division. But there is a lot of overlap between the abilities in those programs of engineering, lands, facilities to work together, and that's what currently we could bring that all together underneath that deputy director, and facilities, equipment, some of the things that are not quite related to some of the other deputy director things. This could be a unifying force of bringing those programs together.
Thank you. So I think I've gotten a lot more clarity on this. So let me attempt to dumb it down to my understanding. Basically, we've got kind of administration and we've got kind of program. And what you're describing a lot is kind of operations. And so that's moving some things that are kind of in the operations sphere that are under these other umbrellas right now into that position. I guess I'll pause there. Is that a kind of fair estimation of how this new reorganization would work with the new deputy position?
Thank you, Chair Watts. Alan Janae, for the record, that is correct.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think that provides a lot of clarity. I think in some of our and you did mention this before, some of the things related to community outreach and public records requests. I think the one thing that I'll flag is that it seems like that might not necessarily fit in. Some of those responsibilities, I think, in our minds don't necessarily equate to a deputy director's role, maybe some things that are handled by a PIO. So you can feel free to respond a little bit to that, but I'd just be interested in figuring out where the appropriate role is. In my mind, it sounds like there's plenty of work for a deputy to do, and maybe what we need to do is look at adding a PIO to handle some of that excess workload. So that's maybe not as much of a question, but just a comment. I also wanted to ask a little bit, because I think this is, I don't know where this goes, so I'll ask while we're on the director's office budget, a little bit about the urban wildlife program. This is something that's come up quite a bit in different places recently. We've got, of course, issues with coyotes in urban areas. Black bears, another huge issue. I know that there were some questions asked during the pre-session budget briefing, and you provided some additional follow-up materials to us, which I really appreciate. And I looked through them, and it says, that currently there's only one educator dedicated to receiving urban wildlife calls in western Nevada, where black bears reside. The educators do a lot in terms of public engagement, and then do education, and when necessary, help figure out the capture and relocation of offending wildlife, and proactively educate communities. Sorry, I just got to get this all out on the record so we're all on the same page here. In 2022, you had over 4,700 calls. The largest one by far was for bears, almost 1,400 calls. And it's not possible for one urban wildlife educator to handle that workload. There's 2 biologists dedicated to the management of the black bear population. You mentioned that you've joined the BearWise program, but again, with just that one wildlife educator, sounds like the capacity to implement that is limited, and we really need another position related to that. And then finally, it seems like our friends over in the state of California approved money for bear-resistant containers to help prevent issues related to bears getting into trash. And it sounds like we don't have, either at the state or at local level, investment in doing some of those things on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe and in the region. So can you just speak to, because it sounds like law enforcement is also involved, can you speak to kind of the pieces that are involved in this? And I didn't see anything in the budget that increases the staffing resources for this program, which I think is a pretty critical need. So can you just speak to that a little bit?
Thank you, Chair Watts. This is a great segue because it takes us into conservation education, which does have our urban wildlife program. So just quickly, conservation education has 24 positions. It deals with our hunter safety program, our hunter and angler education, our wildlife education, and media and public relations, as well as urban wildlife. As I said, or in FY24, we've got $4,767,032, and in FY25, $4,901,258. And I'll answer your question before we get into those decision units. But currently, no, we did not ask for an increase in that piece. As far as our urban wildlife, we did see a very large uptick this last year. I think it was a record-setting year for bear calls up here in western Nevada. But I will actually pass off to Mike Scott, Deputy Director of Natural Resources. He is definitely more familiar with the bear issue than I am.
Thank you for the question. Mike Scott, Deputy Director of Natural Resources. We have a number of people that respond to bear calls, but with respect to the people that take in the calls, they come to our dispatch, law enforcement, so law enforcement's involved, and then we have our urban wildlife person who takes in a lot of those calls as well. Now, if it's a public safety issue, you know, there's an immediate response, but a lot of it is, I saw a bear walk across my lawn, you know, things like that, and we need to respond to those, but we respond to those with education. And since we've become a Bear-Wise state, we're just implementing the Bear-Wise program. We do need funding in order to implement that program. We would love to have another position that would be our Bear-Wise liaison. We didn't ask for that. We were hoping with RAWA dollars that was going to be funded in some respects with that way. But without that, we didn't ask for that position. We do need that position, but you know, we didn't ask for it. But we do need the education component of this and the outreach part of it. And then if there's ever any ability to implement bear-proof containers on the Nevada side, that would be ideal, because what we see is if California goes to bear-proof containers, a lot of those bears are going to migrate our way, and so it could provide a lot larger problem on our side of the lake.
Thank you very much for that. And I guess I should have looked at the little flow chart on the next slide. I would have seen that I jumped the gun a little bit on the question, but I appreciate that, and I think we'll go ahead and go through the two enhancements in this budget and lead to questions.
Thank you again. For the record, Alan Janae. Decision Unit E226 in the Conservation Education Division, looking for $104,000 over both years, FY24 and 25. The request funds the creation and delivery of campaigns, publications, and promotional advertising to potential customers. This is those communication campaigns that we do to try to, when we talk about things such as Bear-Wise or chronic wasting disease, we're trying to inform our public. These are the types of things we're talking about. In Decision Unit E711, we're talking about equipment replacement, $47,348 in FY24, and FY25, we're looking at $94,748. The request is to fund replacement vehicles that have reached the end of their useful life. And with that, we'll stand for questions.
Thank you very much. I believe I have questions from Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you so much. We were just talking a little bit about the bears and how we would also have moved to Nevada because we can get into the trash there if we were bears. But anyways, we digress. Talking about the marketing campaign just a little bit, can you explain a little bit more about what that looks like and what maybe your targeted campaign goals would look like?
Thank you for the question, and this is where I quickly get out of my expertise. I'm a biologist, so I will call up our Conservation Education Administrator, Chris Vasey. Thank you.
Chris Vasey, conservation educator. Chief, and just to some of the questions on regards to what type of outreach that we would do, our targeting outreach, it's really unique that we brought up the bear issue in this. And you talk about a position, but sometimes I think some of the communications that we can take or put out to the public would be better suited in the ways of communications through media, social media, flyers, publications. There's a varied of types of media that we would use, but we can get down to the target market just on some such as the Tahoe Basin. We can do mapping where some of our problematic areas are, and we can target those problematic areas with messaging, whether it's doing social media ads, digital ads, Google ads. We can make those targeted campaigns towards those areas and spread our message way more efficiently. As far as the other marketing and outside of the bear issues, we have coyote issues in the southern region. We're going to do the same. But also promotions from what our great state has to offer, whether it's recreational pursuits. We can do the same thing there too. We can target actual neighborhoods that are close to an urban pond for fishing. We can tell people where those urban ponds are. We can do a lot of messaging, a lot of education through those type of campaigns and be very targeted to the public. But back to the urban wildlife issue, I would say, marketing and campaigns are some of the most efficient way to educate our public.
Thank you. Can I have a follow-up? Thank you. By the way, I like the coyotes. I know they come in my yard because I see them on my camera, but I do like them. Can you talk a little bit about how it was determined of that 104,000? Yes.
Yeah.
How was that determined that was going to be a good amount for your program? And is it across all the programs or just a few of them?
Chris Vasey for the record. As far as the figuring out what we were going to use and spend, it had a lot to do with a lot of our traditional media that's advertised on TV is very effective. And so some of those buys, and I'll have to say that in the southern region is really, really steep. And we were looking at how we could buy ads in some of those areas. Also, the Google ads that we use, every time you do a Google ad, there's a creative concept, right? You have to have somebody create that for you. And you also have to have a media plan and creative production, and then how much money you spend on that advertising after you do all the creation. So we kind of been through this a few times with our ad companies, and we have 3 different vendors that we use, and we roughly kind of took some of those, what has cost us in the past, and used those estimates that kind of and took them out through the years. We could always use more, but we look up through other avenues too. There is grants and other pieces that we have looked at to find other funding.
Thank you. Yes, I think sometimes people underestimate the cost of marketing. So it's good to hear that you're using some grant funding as well. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions on this budget account? Seeing none, thank you very much. And again, before we move on, I think we're all still got our fingers crossed that Recovering America's Wildlife Act gets passed sometimes, but without speaking too ill of our colleagues in the federal government, I don't know if we can afford to wait on them to make some of the investments in some of these programs. So I think that's something that I would be interested in following up to understand a little bit more about and make sure that, again, as we potentially see some other initiatives that might push more bears into Nevada and potentially result in more incidents, that we have some things put in place to address that. So with that, we'll move on to law enforcement.
Thank you. Again, for the record, Alan Janae. Looking at the law enforcement division, we have 54 positions. We have wildlife enforcement, boating enforcement, public safety, boating education, dispatch services, radio and technology. In FY '24, we're looking at a budget of $8,566,992, and in FY '25, $8,549,342. The decision units I'll walk through quickly. Looking at Decision Unit E301, this is a request for specialized training equipment for law enforcement officers. And in E302, looking at $68,324 over both years. This is to restore our boating safety outreach program to previous legislatively approved amounts and fund campaigns to increase boating safety awareness and promote the use of life jackets, sober boating, and boating education courses. And so this is definitely, when we talk about boating safety, this is probably one of those places where we see the benefit to the general citizenship. A lot of other places that we deal with people, it's in, very targeted, they're hunters, they're fishermen, they're, whatever. But boating, this is anybody that's participating and recreating on the water is we're having an involvement with. Our officers have saved drowning victims, have saved boating crashes. Hopefully, through our patrols, we've actually minimized, opportunities for accidents. And so, but this is definitely that common benefit to all citizens. In Decision Unit E304, looking at $9,369 over both years. This is looking for additional funds for additional training and conference registration fees. E673 is a one-time salary adjustment as proposed by the governor in FY24. That would be $288,459, and the same amount in FY25. This request would fund a 2-grade increase for frontline game wardens across the state. E710 is, and I'll just go back to that, but that E73 and that 2-grade increases, it was actually beneficial to have DPS go in front of us. I think all state law enforcement agencies are seeing this challenge of trying to keep our positions filled. There's a lot of other entities that are paying better salaries and are attracting, our employees away. And that reflects in that, I think it was 27% vacancy rate that we see in law enforcement right now. And so it is a tough job, but also when you can get paid a much higher amount by other entities doing much the same kind of work, it becomes often too attractive for folks with young families. And so we've seen that attrition, and this is to help address that issue. In the E710 decision unit, we're looking for $367,889 in FY24, and in FY25 we're looking for $318,438, and this is to request funds for the replacement equipment such as trailers, vessels, UTVs, and other special law enforcement equipment. E711 replacement equipment, looking for $174,573 in FY24, and in FY25 $179,115, and this is to fund replacement vehicles again at the end of their useful life. E710 or 720 is looking at new equipment, $203,850 in FY24 and $77,434 in FY25. And this is to fund new equipment such as thermal imaging devices, equipment for boats, repeaters, drones, specialized computers, shotguns, rifle accessories, and rangefinders. As you are well aware, law enforcement has a lot of special equipment that is necessary relative to their public safety requirements. So that's what this is to help fund. Looking at Decision Unit E674, looking at $36,345 in FY24 and $37,176 in FY25. And this is seeking a 1 grade increase for our game warden 4s and our staff warden game positions and our game warden positions. So this is to, help maintain that separation in supervision. With the other game wardens coming up, puts them very close to their supervisors in pay, and so this 1 grade is to pull them and create that separation. So it is to support that initial request for the 2 grade increase for game wardens. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. I do have a question. I think you did explain pretty well about the importance of restoring the funding to the boating safety program. And again, I just want to express our appreciation for all that you do, because we know that you're saving lives out there. I guess this is another one where I think in your overview you mentioned we're 7th largest by land area, 5th smallest wildlife agency. And you mentioned some of the challenges that we have in recruiting and retaining law enforcement. At the same time, we've seen in many of our other law enforcement agencies, not only are they trying to recruit and retain, but they are asking for additional positions because they see an additional need. So you can follow up with this if you don't have it available, but I'd be interested in knowing what's the trend that we've been seeing in the size of NDOW's law enforcement, because it sounds to me like the workload for the amount of area that those law enforcement officers need to cover, and kind of again the growing complexity of things that they need to do, from enforcing our laws and regulations to going out and making sure that people that are recreating are safe, is probably outside of the capacity, even if we're able to get all of our current positions filled. So I'd be interested in knowing kind of where that is, because I just have a sense that we need to put some additional resources into that.
Thank you, Chair Watts. For the record, Alan Janae, and this is, one of those places where it's as a pretty much self-funded agency, as this is a tough walk for us. Is that in general, our revenue from those contributing fees and programs is really not increasing. And so when you contemplate law enforcement division, especially, is that our payments for those positions are often state dollars, solely state dollars. We don't have near the opportunity to match our state dollar in those programs, other than Coast Guard programs, as much as we do with, say, our Pittman-Robertson with game and habitat division positions, where we get that benefit of, 3-to-1 match. In law enforcement, it becomes a dollar for dollar conversation. So every position, that's, with the exception of, like I say, the Coast Guard, where we get, I think it's approximately a little over $1 million in grant support, is that every one of those positions is a state dollar, which becomes very tough when you're contemplating the benefit of that in the mission of the agency, but also in the tightness of the agency and the budget of, where can you derive the greatest benefit of that dollar. And when you're getting the opportunity at $3 over here for $1, it becomes a tough conversation over here when you're not getting that grant support or other additional support to carry those officers. So there is no doubt. I mean, we are, Chief Christy Knight could absolutely explain just how scarce we are in representation of game wardens and law enforcement in the state of Nevada. But it's a very complex conversation when you're talking about it in the maintenance and management of the agency. So appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And understanding you've got the marketing and other efforts to try and bring in more folks, and that can help bring in more revenue to support some of these programs. At the same time, this is not an enterprise agency. And, while it's extremely impressive what you're able to pull in terms of sportsman-generated funds, and then pull in those matching dollars, and are only, I think, what you say, 2% general funded. There is some general fund in there, and this agency is not required to cover all of its expenses, and so I'd be interested in having discussions about allowing you to maximize some of those sportsman dollars and pull in those federal matches. But again, make sure that when you have those needs that are dollar for dollar, that we find a way to get them. Because I think if we're sitting around waiting for Congress or waiting for a significant boost in those sportsman dollars, that's not the sit around and hope is not the proper approach when we have these critical needs in things like our urban wildlife program and law enforcement, especially again in boating, where that is a benefit to the general public, and it's saving lives out, particularly out on Lake Mead. So, members, any additional questions on law enforcement? Senator Gochia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Janae, how long have you had this 27% vacancy rate? I know it hasn't been that bad, but probably since the pandemic, you've hit a kind of a wall, I'm sure, as far as staffing.
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. And I would say that's probably when we saw it start, was, as we went through the pandemic and then came out the backside. I think all state agencies had that same experience, is that we started to drop off. But I know we have been chronically challenged with, especially our wardens, and maintaining full capacity even prior to the pandemic.
I thank you on that. Just a quick follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair. But truly, it's all about recruitment, and let's get these bodies in there. I mean, 33, Class 3 wardens is a lot of wardens in this state if you had them in place. But instead, you're running at 20. And bottom line is, you don't have. It's no different than the highway patrol troopers or anywhere else. We've got to fill these positions. I'm not so worried about adding more and figuring out how to fund them. They're in the budget. Let's get them paid and get them on the job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any additional questions on law enforcement? All right. Seeing none, we'll go to the last budget account for today, fisheries management.
Thank you. So diving into fisheries management, our fish management division, our fisheries division has 46 positions. They take care of our sport fish production, our fish hatchery management, our native aquatics, aquatic health monitoring, and our aquatic invasive species. In FY24, we're looking at a budget of $11,869,565. And in FY25, we're looking at a budget of $9,787,942. Looking at the enhancements, E251, we're looking for $260,000 in FY24 to deal with hatchery refurbishment on our air coil cooling tower structure at Mason Valley Hatchery. This is basically necessary. It's a cold water fish hatchery, and so there is a temperature at which we must have that water in order to keep those fish alive. And without that cooling tower, it wouldn't be so good at raising trout. So really key piece of equipment. Decision unit E710, looking at $241,057 in FY24, and in FY25 looking at $88,689, and this is to fund replacement equipment such as vessels, decontamination units, generators, boat motors, and electrofishing backpacks. Especially we're looking at a refurbishment of an electroshocking boat, which is what we use to try to monitor fish populations in reservoirs. Looking at decision E711, looking at replacement equipment, that is looking at $151,853 in FY24 and $99,450 in FY25, and that is for vehicle replacement for those that have reached their end of their useful life. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. I believe we have questions from Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for being so succinct and getting straight to the point. When it comes to the air cooling tower, notice that it is only being funded for the 2024, but no funding for 2025. How confident are you that it will, in fact, be done?
Yes, thank you for the question. We have experience with this. I believe we have a very good quote on this. And so this is, I believe it's a 10-year maintenance cycle. And so what we need to do, I believe there's 5 chambers in there. And what we'll do is we'll shut down a chamber. They'll work on that chamber. And then once that particular chamber is done, they'll bring it back online and then go to the next one and work their way through those 5 chambers. So, but this is something we've had experience with before, and so we're pretty familiar with this process.
Thank you, Chair, and may I ask a follow-up? Why is it being funded from the from this budget instead of the capital improvement program, since it is kind of capital improvement?
I will look around to see. I'm seeing white ice. So, yeah. I don't know that was actually. I don't know if that's been considered as far as a capital improvement project. Thank you. I guess it was probably because it was associated with the fish hatchery, and that's the way it's been funded in the past, and that's probably why we considered that. But thank you for the question and possible recommendation.
Thank you. And I know there's some other fisheries projects that are capital improvement. So we're just going to have you connect with our staff about that, make sure that we get it all accounted for properly. And on that note, we've got some updates on the Lake Mead Fish Hatchery Water Supply Line project. Great to see that that's moving forward. Looks like it's moving pretty well. The one thing is that it doesn't look like, while the funds are kind of, the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds were allocated towards it, it doesn't seem like it's, so they're kind of dedicated, but it doesn't look like it's necessarily budgeted in the recommended budget. So that's something that I'd also like to ask you to follow up with our fiscal staff about. I know that we've got it set aside, but we want to make sure that when it comes to having everything obligated, that we've got as much detail and as much plans put in place as possible. So I'll ask you to follow up with them about that. Members, any other questions on fisheries management? All right, seeing none, thank you again very much for your time and your presentation today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Members, that takes us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Anyone wishing to provide public comment by phone can find the information on our agenda, which is posted on the legislature's website. We'll ask anyone wishing to make public comment to limit their remarks to 2 minutes. And please begin by stating and spelling your name clearly for the record. With that, it looks like we have somebody wishing to provide public comment in Las Vegas. You can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Bill Hanlon, Hanlon. I want to comment on public education. We have to stop making subjects like math hard to learn. That affects science, engineering, and technologies. Teachers can't teach what they don't know. As you can see from today's handout, and I hope that many of you have it, you can see how math is connected all through school. You have the Pythagorean theorem, the distance formula equation for a circle, and the trig identity, cosine squared plus sine squared.
And sir, this is not the education committee.
Yeah, no, I'm aware. But the Ways and Means and Finance Committees are the ones that make the decisions finally on education.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So not linking these makes teaching and makes these subjects being taught in isolation. It makes it harder to learn. What I'm hoping is that as members of the Finance Committee and Ways and Means Committee, you will understand the importance of teacher quality in terms of increasing student achievement covenant levels and learning. So I'm hoping that you'll support the RPDPs in terms of making sure our students have access to high-quality teachers. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing no one wishing to provide public comment in Carson City and no one else in Las Vegas, Broadcast Production Services, can we see if we have anyone wishing to make public comment by phone?
Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
All right. Thank you all very much for your time today. This meeting is adjourned.